right, welcome back to the shop. We got another one for you. This is going to be a 2018 Ford Fusion with a 1.5 Ecoboost. So it's got a coolant leak. It is coming from the water pump. I'll get it up in the air and show you what's going on there. So we're going to put a water pump in it and change out the timing belt. And there's a little trick to that stuff. A lot of specialty tools that you have to do one of these. It involves pulling the starter off. We do not have to pull the valve cover off and lock the camshafts because we're not going to pull the cam phasers loose or anything like that. There's a tool to hold the cam sprocket. The dampener bolt, if you loosen that up, the only way that you can get it back on is to get it lined up correctly is to have that special tool. So let's get it up in the air and I'll show you what's going on. We got the inner fender removed and try to get you up in there and show you what's going on there. You can see the water pump is leaking right there. Light's never in the right spot. So right here is the water pump. You can see there is a little bit of coolant there. So it does sit behind the timing cover, the timing belt. So once we have all that apart, like I said, we're going to replace the timing belt, the water pump. One thing to note on these, again, it takes 4 or 5 specialty tools to do this job. We end up pulling the bracket off here because there is a pin that has to locate in the side of the block here, and you turn the crankshaft and it butts up to it, and that's what holds the position. Like I said, once you pull this bolt out, it's kind of downhill from there. Do not pull the bolt out on a 1.5 Ecoboost unless you have the timing tools, because once you do that, you could get the timing off and have some major issues. So again, the starter has to be pulled off, and there is a tool to hold the flywheel, because this bolt takes a lot of torque, and to torque that back to spec it's crazy. It's like 74 foot-pounds, I think, and then a couple steps, like I don't know if it's 90 and then 45, I don't know. But anyway, I will let you know further in the video here. Again, like I said, we have to get to the starter up here. It's kind of a pain in the butt because it sits right there. And we got to pull the oil cooler off, the oil filter, some of this other stuff out of the way to get at it. And we'll go around the back side here. And I don't know if you can see that bolt up there, but that bolt has to be removed, and that's where your special tool goes in there. All right, let's get this one started. For the sake of the length of the video here, we're going to do a lot of time lapse, and I'll kind of stop every now and then and point out some very important stuff as far as like where the tools go, how they're used, why we're doing it this way. So let's get started. All right, so we're here on the bottom side here. One of our next steps is to remove this bracket that holds the axle. The axle does not have to come out. It's got that clamshell clamp on there. We can get the bracket out of the way and then get our special tool in there to stop the crankshaft from turning, so it locates the rotation or position of the crankshaft. So you can also see here, maybe better from the other side here, bottom side, without a motor mount in there, we have to block up the engine a little bit just so we don't stress anything up here as far as hoses, that stuff, these little black plastic connectors. You know, all this stuff likes to crack, it seems like, when they're under a little bit of stress. So again, here is our bracket we have to pull off. And then one thing I forgot, which I'll have to go back up and do, is there's a bracket right up here, and we need to pull that off because there's a little strap on this back cover here, and we need to get that loose. So that has to come off also. Something I forgot earlier. So let's see if we can get this out of there. There we go. Again, our bolt is right here. We need to pull that out so we can get our locating pin in there. Alright, so there's a lot of stuff to get out of the way up here to get the starter out. I got the coolant drained out of this hose here. Pull these other lines off. We got to get this oil cooler off too. Not to mention all this other crap up there. so the oil cooler, there's a 12 millimeter hex in there. So you got to use a 12 millimeter Allen socket. Big boy. And she's loose. Just pull it off. All right, so there's our starter. We can actually see more of it. That's a step in the right direction. I think I'm gonna change the camera angle and start removing all this. Okay, so here's our starter. These are a pain in the ass to get out. If you move this hose, you can see the electrical connections up here. This is the harness. So we got all three bolts out. She's ready to come out of here. So yeah, as you can see, 3 bolts. These cars are a pain in the ass to do any kind of timing stuff on there. You know, that's a 2.5 hour job alone to pull the starter out of one of these. And that's just so we can get our timing tool lined up in there. So, wasn't Ford's greatest idea as far as I'm concerned. So, all right, we'll get that front cover off. We need to get our cam sprocket holder in there, and then the rest of our holding tools, and then we can finally pull that crank bolt out and then remove the dampener. So remember that bracket that I forgot to get off the back? That actually bolts through here. That's why you got to take that bracket off to get this out. Kind of a great idea, to be honest with you. Not so much. All right, so I'll get you in here as close as I can. So right here on the tooth part of this sprocket, there's a little mark. It looks like an eye right there. So that we want that at 11 o'clock. You can also see one here, maybe. It's a little dot on this one. So we want that facing about, obviously, 11 o'clock along with the other one. So now let's put our pin in the bottom and we turn it until it butts up. So we got our tool here. This is a special tool. It just goes in here and it stops the crankshaft from rotating. If you have a kit with multiple ones, usually it's going to be the one with the slot in it. I think the part number from Motorcraft is like 303748, something like that. I don't know. Anyway, it's this one. Maybe it's 7408. Not sure. Okay, so we got that installed. You can see it right there. Just goes in all the way. Okay, so that dowel is in there. We're going to rotate the crankshaft clockwise, and it's going to stop right there because that pin is stopping the crankshaft from rotating. So now we're going to let the vehicle down and see if we can get our timing tools put in the cam sprockets up there. Okay, so the next tool we're going to use is this one right here. This is going to hold the synchronizers or the cam sprockets, whatever you want to call them. So there's only one way this goes in. Obviously the up means up. They even labeled this one with the same indicator right here and a dot for this timing mark on this side. So let's see if we can get this in here. Oh heck yeah. Get her in there all the way. So right now that's holding the camshafts. So we remove that starter. We got another locking mechanism, or locking tool, I should say. And that tool goes on the flywheel to hold the crank so we can loosen that crank bolt. So yeah, one step after another to do kind of what I think should be a more simple job, but yet we just want to get here and remove this water pump. But this stands in the way. So yeah, kind of pain in the butt trying to go through all this trouble of getting this done. Like, we couldn't think of a simpler way to do this, but this is where we're at. We're back for another tool. Here is the flywheel locking tool. So this just sits where the starter would bolt in normally. So we're going to use a couple of starter bolts. We have to get a couple nuts on there. These are interchangeable depending on how far the flywheel sits back. You got a short one here, longer one here. It's actually going to take this longer one, so we got to change that out for this one. And then I'll get that mounted in where it belongs, and I'll show you how it sits in there. You can kind of see our tool in there. That's what it looks like. So we got the starter bolt in there, and then that center just gets tightened down, and that's what fits between the notches in the flywheel. So at this point, we can finally pull our crank pulley off. So crank bolt, 18 millimeter. Just get it out of the impact here. She's tight. This bolt, do not reuse. This is a discard bolt. Okay, so this dampener, you have to be careful. Oh, this one might come off. This is going to come right off. a lot of times these kind of seize on a little bit. So I end up using just a pry bar with a little claw on it, and you can get behind here and work it off. You just got to make sure you do not hit this ring. This is the trigger ring for the crankshaft. So make sure you're out here, like in this area right here, if you need to kind of pry behind there a little bit. You don't want to pry too hard, obviously, but so you can see here that this free spins. So you think, well, how the hell does that work? Well, there's a special tool. We have to remove the crankshaft here, or crankshaft sensor, excuse me, and there's a little locating tool. So you put a tool in here and it will actually locate itself in this notch. So that's how you set the dampener in phase with all the timing. So again, just another brilliant idea, let me tell you. So yeah, we're gonna remove this crank sensor, get our timing belt tensioner loose there, get our belt off, and we're on our way to replacing the water pump here. So we got our timing belt tensioner in here. I like to use this pry bar up the back side here. And you actually have to just push this up. And then, let's see, how am I gonna do this? Use an Allen wrench here. All right, sorry about my reach. So yeah, that loosens the belt there. You just use like I said, an Allen wrench in there. That works real good. Let's pull this tensioner off. Kind of bumped you guys around, sorry about that. All right, so there's a better look at the tensioner there. Pay attention to how this goes back in. Well, we're going to use a new tensioner, obviously, but you know, there's a locating tab here, and then the other two go on the outside there. So you can see here, again, this is why you don't pull that crank pulley out. Because this just freewheels. So again, I don't know why a lot of these manufacturers are doing that. I mean, other than maybe it's easier on the assembly line, something there. But yeah, if you pull this crank bolt out, let's get the belt out of the way. You know, if you pull that belt out, or excuse me, the bolt out, then the crank pulley, the crank dampener, the crank pulley could end up, you know, rotating on the crankshaft, and then that throws your timing out of whack. So this is why you have to go through all this trouble of putting these tools in, aligning everything. That's really the best way to do it. I'm sure there's other ways you can do it. If you get creative marking stuff, I don't know. There's tools for a reason. That's why I use them. So yeah, let's get our water pump pulled off here and get the new one installed. So we got the old water pump out. You can see where it was leaking pretty good. It's actually running down the side of the block. So, I mean, if you see some stains in here, not really a big deal, but this one was dripping. So
time to replace it. We're gonna just verify that it all looks like the original. Make sure that the dowels are in place. We got a new gasket here, metal gasket. I'm going to use some anaerobic sealer on both sides of this, and then we're going to get that put back in there. All right, we got the water pump put in here. These bolts are torqued to 89 inch-pounds. We got our tensioner put in. That's a new tensioner out of the kit. That bolt is 18 foot-pounds, and you can see there is a little pin holding that so there's no pressure on it. So let's get our belt put on it, and yeah, then we can start putting this all back together. Okay, so at this point, we got our belt on. You really want to make sure that it's real tight in between the two sprockets up here. If you have a tooth off or something, as soon as you pull all your timing stuff out, it's going to move out of time. So make sure that we got our, belt on, wrapped around. Every tooth is where it belongs, like it's seated in there. We can now pull our tensioner pin. Again, making sure it feels real good up there. Okay, so at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to put our special tool on to index the vibration dampener on there. So that's just a tool that takes the place of the crank sensor. It's got that tab on there. We're going to put that on to get our balancer bolt torqued, and then we're going to rotate this engine about a turn and a half, turn and 3/4. Once we pull our locking tools out, and then we're going to put the back pin in, rotate it a little bit until it stops, and then we're going to make sure that this tool goes back in here. If it does not go back in after you've rotated the engine, then the timing will be off. So we're going to start with getting that dampener put on. All right, back to the toolkit. You saw me actually use an Allen key for the tensioner. There's the tool for it right there. So yeah, I overlooked that. But up here, whoops, here's the next tool we're going to use. This is the locator for the front dampener. And again, this is the new bolt for the dampener. You got to replace that. Here's the back side. This, when it is in, it bolts to where the crank sensor bolts to, but this little tab will go right in there. And then that's how you find where this is on the crankshaft. So again, another genius freaking deal there. But yeah, that, once that's bolted to the block, you put your crank pulley on, and it should fit in that notch, and then you can tighten your bolt down. So here's our balancer. We got a index, like I was saying. What I usually do is where this little notch is right here, right there, I usually put a paint mark on the opposite side. That way I can kind of tell where I should be looking to seat that on the crankshaft. So let's put this on. So again, you see our tool right there. This is our locating tool. That will go in the notch on the back side of the dampener. So let's put this on here. It should rotate freely. If it doesn't, you need to clean the end of the crankshaft up. But you see right there, it's not back. There it is right there. If you pull it out just a little bit, it'll spin, and then it will go back in where it finds that notch. So again, it's not in all the way right there. That's why I put that paint mark. As soon as it gets up here, it should slide back all the way right there, and you can feel it
engage that notch. So next step is to get that crank bolt torqued. And again, that is a high torque bolt, 74 foot-pounds. I believe it's 90 degrees. Then it says wait 2 seconds, which is odd to me. And then another 15 degrees additional on top of that. So let's get that torqued. All right, let's get our bolt in there. Again, you must use a new bolt. This one came in the kit, like I was saying. It does have a little pre-lube on it. All right, so 74 foot-pounds to start with. There's 74. All right, we're going to turn that bolt another 90 degrees. There's 24. Okay, there's 90 degrees, and that is tight. Now it says wait a couple seconds and turn it another additional 15 degrees. All right, we're set up for 15 degrees here. Whew. Yes, that is a lot of torque. All right, so right now we're going to pull our dampener indicator or tool out here. We're going to pull all our locking tools off, and then we're going to spin this over and then to kind of reset timing and see if we can get our cam locks back in there. And if those go back in, then we're good to go. All right, so we pulled all our locking tools off so we could rotate the engine. We rotated it 1 3/4 of a turn, and then we put our pin back in, which stops the crankshaft from rotating. And then we put that pin in, rotate the crankshaft until it stops, butts up against that pin, and now we have to see if our tool will fit back in here. If it does not, we did something wrong. So again, this only goes in one way. It's got an arrow. So right there, we can verify timing is all set. Now it's just a matter of putting the cover back on it and kind of wrapping stuff up here. Just kind of reverse procedure actually. So let's get started putting it back together. All right, good morning. It is another day of working on this Fusion. So last night kind of got most of the stuff put back together, putting the oil cooler on it. And again, you do have to buy a new oil cooler because the seal is not replaced separately. So I'll just kind of show you, we got most of the stuff all back together here. The top side is all put back together. We got our stretch belt on there. Our plug put back in the side of the block. All that stuff is good to go. The top side is pretty much done. So I want to talk to you about this cooler. Here it is right here. Here's the seal that they say is not serviced, which is kind of odd. But I checked into it, and yeah, the Ford parts catalog does not list that separate. It comes as a whole kit here. So that part number, let's see if I can find it here, is right there. So give you a new
bolt for it, I guess, is what you would call it. Again, it does have that hex in there, so you have to use like an Allen style socket to get that put back in there. Now, I'm gonna, this is doing this job by the book, okay? So these are the required parts that you have to have. Did I do it exactly by the book? Not quite. Someone might say, hey, you didn't remove the turbocharger inlet pipe. Well, yeah, I didn't do it exactly by the book. But I did it the way they say to put all the tools in, lock everything down. Now at the end of the video, I'm going to kind of go over what I think we can maybe save some time. Let's put it that way, and save quite a bit of time. So we're gonna finish putting this back together, and then we'll go over kind of a cheat that I think will work and save us a little bit of time the next time we do this job. All right, so we got everything finished up here. We got some coolant put back in it, new oil filter on it. It just had an oil change, so we're not changing oil on it. Yeah, we're ready to start this thing up. So she sounds like a 1.5 Ecoboost. No surprise there. I'm just gonna shut it off, and then we're gonna kind of get everything cleaned up here. There was a lot of coolant spilled. She's got a lot of debris on the cowling there. We're gonna take care of that. Get it all washed up. We're gonna restart it, let it run until it cooling system bleeds out and the thermostat opens. We got good heat, all that good stuff. So that's our next step. All right, so we're just finishing up on this Fusion here. We're just gonna double check it for leaks here, make sure everything is good to go. You can see our new water pump in up there. Take a look at the bottom here, make sure everything is good to go. All right. So like I was saying before, I feel like there's time that we can save on this. So these special tools, we have the pin that stops the crankshaft from turning. It turns counterclockwise. It butts up right to the tip of the pin. So you have to pull the starter off and put the locking tool in to stop the flywheel from turning. Why do you have to do that? My only thought is they want you to do that when you're loosening the crankshaft bolt to keep it from turning the other way. Because if we think about it, if we tighten it, it's going to turn clockwise anyway, and that pin is going to stop it from turning. So my question here is, do we even need to pull the starter off? Do we need to install that tool on the flywheel? Because we can just knock the bolt loose with a impact. And then the crankshaft is obviously pinned. You just have to make sure that it is rotated clockwise and that it is making contact with that pin. If it's not, then it's not mechanically in time. And then you have your camshaft sprockets that are pinned with that bracket that goes on there. And then of course you do have to have the tools and stuff to do all this, the balancer, and get that in their correct position. But I'm thinking we could save time, quite a bit of time, because like I said, to pull a starter on one of these is 2.2 hours. So can we save 2.2 hours and not have to pull the starter off and pin that or lock that flywheel? And you would save the cost of pulling the oil filter housing off and have to replace that. I mean, it's only, I think, $32 for the engine oil cooler, so it's not a big deal. But something to think about. I'm thinking for the next one, I'm not going to pull the starter out. I'm going to do it without pulling the starter out. And if you guys have any suggestions or comments on that, again, I work on customer vehicles, so we don't want to shortchange a customer here. We want to do the job and we want to do it right. But
we also want to be efficient at what we do. So maybe I need to think about it a little bit more, but I'm thinking right now that's kind of what I would do. I don't see an issue with it. But again, if you guys think otherwise, let me know. So yeah, that's gonna wrap this one up. I gotta take it out for a test drive. I got the cooling system all bled. That takes, you know, it's a process. You gotta rev the engine up a little bit, and then do that over and over again. There is a special procedure for that, and there is a bleed that you have to loosen up the plug on, bleed as much air out as you can. If you do not get the air out of these when you're on your test drive, you may come up with a, see, it's a code for the auxiliary water pump, and what it's basically telling is if you have like an airlock, there's no resistance on the impeller of the water pump, it'll set a code. So that's another thing to kind of worry about. Make sure that you're bleeding it out correctly. You'll find it on a test drive because it will set the code for sure. So, but yeah, this is gonna do it for another one, guys. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe.